Keneth Twesigye from Kampala, Uganda. He is the founder and CEO of TechBuzz, one of the largest hubs for startups in Africa. And he also works with the Ministry of Trade in Uganda. Welcome, Keneth. It's great to have you here.
It's a pleasure to be hosted by you, Rebecca, and I am very, very happy and looking forward to the conversation today.
Since we met in Ethiopia, you have gone on to do great things. I would love to visit TechBuzz in Uganda. I was there when I was 16 years old, or actually, I think I was 15. I was volunteering Wakisa Ministries there, and I really fell in love with the place. I was only there for 10 days, but what is Uganda like now? Please tell us more about Kampala and what's happening there in innovation.
Well, Kampala, just like any other country in Africa, of course, a lovely place to be. And actually why we are called specifically the Pearl of Africa is because we have one of the best weathers in the world. If it is not the best globally, then I think we are maybe number 2, number 3 there. We are always at a constant weather of around 23 to 27. So Uganda is a great place to be, is regarding innovation and entrepreneurship. It is also one of the vibrant destinations in Africa, not the in the best 4, of course. We know we already have the big 4, Nigeria, South Africa, Egypt, and Kenya. But Uganda comes at least in the list of the first 8 best destinations regarding innovation and entrepreneurship.
What is your story? Like, how did you even get into this? I know you studied computer science, but can you tell us more about like how your journey evolved? So after you finished studying, how did you get into this space? What was your journey?
I would take a whole day to discuss that, but I would try to be quick. So during my vacation, I happened to travel to Dar es Salaam, which is Tanzania, and I was still young, below 20 years. And that is after high school, and reaching in a place where I do not actually speak the language and not anyone actually speaks English. Quite easily, you can find someone. So I was forced to actually listen to international channels. At the time, it wasn't a common thing to access in Uganda. DSTV was very expensive and was a privilege of only the rich. So getting into that space is when I started seeing the richest people at the time, Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, who was also coming up. It looked like the biggest story started with computer science. And even when back in my country, I wanted to actually join an engineering school or a business school because I knew I was meant for those 2 areas. By the time I came back, my mind had already changed because I was inspired by these rich guys and their background, and I wanted to explore what actually makes such kind of people rich. So by the time I came back to Uganda, I did the course just as an explorer. And before I finished the course, I think I was already taken up to build an innovation hub. TechBuzzHub started even before I finished university. And even at the starting phase, I think we were able to even get some seed funding from Tony Ermel Foundation. Yeah, that's a little bit how I started.
It takes obviously a certain type of person to want to do what you're doing because you're supporting, you're like a catalyst. You're helping on those 5 different areas that TechBuzz helps with coaching. Could you walk us through all the various areas that you help the entrepreneurs with?
Oh, thank you very much. Very, very excited indeed. My personal purpose is actually to develop and mentor a new breed of African entrepreneurs. Of course, by new breed, it means entrepreneurs who are intentional, entrepreneurs who look at value than just, putting out a product for the money and so on and so forth. Currently at TechBuzz, we provide majorly 4 services. They could be 5, but 4 are the most active one at the moment. One of them being, of course, we are a co-working space. We offer affordable and flexible office spaces. We provide capacity building and training, especially focusing on entrepreneurs and also talent that should be hired by these entrepreneurs that at least have gone through a certain level of training to be value oriented. As well, we provide mentorship and coaching. We incubate startup companies. And one important thing I want to mention is we started a project that looks at empowering local funding or local investors to start investing in local businesses or local startups. And whoever is listening in, whichever country you're from, I think this is a conversation we cannot deal away with, because we all know how hard it is to raise investment externally, especially if our homegrown investors or our local persons haven't even believed in putting a penny into our businesses.
In South Africa, we have a big risk-averse culture because we have very traditional industries. And so that's, I think, been a big frustration for a lot of venture capitalists, is like, come on, like unlock the funds. This is how innovation works. The same, maybe similar within Europe, although they have way more cash to spend. What's in Uganda? What's the problem? What is holding back these investors?
There are very many things that impede access to investment, especially for startups, to be specific. And one of them could be the product itself, because these investors already are looking at products and services or solutions that are scalable, that could wake up in the next day, they are in 20 countries or so, or even globally being used as a global solution. That is one of them. The major one is always about safety. And safety, you can't talk about safety of an investment and do not talk about policies, legislation. So that is one of the biggest challenges. And if you try to evaluate the biggest countries when it comes to attracting funding, of course, we talk about Nigeria, we talk about Kenya, we talk about South Africa and Egypt. We are already talking about some sort of safety in terms of the legislative policies, that if I invest my money in a country where I know that there is at least a bare minimum a recognition of a startup and how actually safe I could put my money into these startups, then I will find it easy to actually invest in the locally grown startups, which is a different story in Uganda. But we are trying to develop that, actually lead a policy conversation under the Ministry of Trade to make sure that by maybe by close of 2025, we already have a startup policy, which will eventually come to a startup act. So then that will allow us to start attracting a lot of venture capitalists, because they will know that it's a recognized sector, it is legislated efficiently, certainly. So it already creates some safety, and investors can freely now start deploying their capital.
Oh, that's interesting. So what is the policy state exactly?
It is literally about supporting policies, developing policies that empower, support, and incentivize the development of startups. We all know that startups are catalysts of jobs, are catalysts of growth and development in different countries. And so the conversation is literally about empowering and incentivizing people who are starting this business. And we all know that most of them are started by youth who do not have as much of, bank history, who do not have as much of maybe assets that can be used as collateral to get bank loans and so on and so forth. And so if we start even taxing them the very first day, we are literally milking a cow that hasn't yet, given birth. So at the end of the day, you will kill a cow, It touches a lot of things. It touches incentivizing tax incentives, of course. Yeah, it touches issues to do with immigration. It touches issues to do with ease of movement of talent. So talent can move from South Africa to Uganda with ease, as well as talent, just internally being able to have a fair sort of landing when they start working for startups. Maybe they're not being paid so much, so taxation on their money shouldn't be as much as it is for anyone working for any other sector. Yeah.
And what products are you seeing are really successful in your hub?
Of course, co-working space is one of the products we look at and which is sustaining a lot of our work. I mean, that is why we were recognized as the best co-working space in Africa, and we didn't just stop there, but also get recognized as the best co-working space globally. So that is one of the spaces, the services that are very successful, but as well, we are seeing the empowerment of investment, local investment, as one of those upcoming services that everyone we talk to actually looks forward to. You can see the enthusiasm, the excitement, and people feel like, yeah, this has been the missing thing. And we hope that maybe that could be the next winner of even many awards, not just about awards, but influence not only in Uganda, but on the African ecosystem entirely.
Within the startups that are renting your space, have you seen any ones that you feel are promising, that are growing fast, that you would say everybody should invest in this one?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We have an eyewear company called Rivkah Glasses. It has about more than 10 branches in Uganda, and we think it is one of those that is growing rapidly and sustainably. But we also have a few others that are making it into the space, not directly supported by TechBuzz under co-working space, but through other support, maybe training and all that, called Tubayo. Tubayo is a marketplace and an Airbnb of Africa. So anyone out there, it would be amazing to check out Tubayo and get into conversation if you have some money. I mean, it could be the next big thing that could replace Airbnb in Africa. Knowing our African problems, addressing them, and delivering far better value, maybe.
And what problem are they solving?
You know how it is very hard to come from South Africa and say you are visiting Uganda. It allows you to book experiences in Uganda without moving a mile. So by the time you reach Uganda, all your different destinations have already been sorted. You just get in and maybe get to that Uber, if it is an Uber, or get your means to the facility, or just make a phone call. I am already in Uganda. How can I travel there? You get the means and get into those different places. Tour, as soon, of course, as you reach, you get tour support, and your experience is seamless, as if you have, or you are actually a local or a Ugandan, but yet actually you had never at all visited maybe a country like Uganda.
How is the wealth distributed?
We are not a socialist country. We are more or less a capitalist country, where it's your labor, it's your hard work that will help you amass as much wealth as possible. But of course, we will know that most of the wealth distribution, wealth amassed, is from the capital. And so it is, for the most part, deployed within the capital city and the greater central region of Uganda. But we also know that because of having a single president for quite a long time, there has been some probable arguments that there is more wealth in the western of the country as opposed to other countries, which looks like a trend. Every president that comes into office, it looks like there is some sort of favoritism. I can't confirm that, but those are arguments that are made. So, but to correctly answer your question, I think the central region holds most or the biggest wealth, because that is where, for the most part, is made from.
When we talk about investors, like, how do you envision that actually unlocking for the startups in Kampala?
I find the best approach to unlocking capital is in knowledge and awareness. Most of the people we have in Uganda, and I think most of Africa, is because they are very aware of traditional ways of investment. And these, because of the interests of government, you will only hear investments in bonds, investments in securities, and so on and so forth, because government has an interest in that, especially to facilitate and fund its budgets, you know. But if people knew that actually that is, as you said, risk averse, that is the most safest way, yes, but it is not the most efficient way of actually building capital. If, for example, I gave a vivid scenario, if in Africa we had just a bare minimum of 1,000 high net worth individuals. High net worth individuals are people who hold a lot of wealth, maybe in millions and billions of dollars, and they are, I believe every country has people of that nature. If just each of them chose to give 0.1% of their wealth, which is like $1 million, I can assure you that, or even less than that, I can assure you that locally we would be having about 3 billion, maybe 3 billion US dollars invested yearly in Africa. But we are here making waves that $2 billion have been invested in Africa in 2024. What are we talking about? Yet we have people who hold the wealth, but they are happy to hold the wealth in their houses. They are happy to hold the wealth in the banks or even put it in bonds. We just don't lack money. We just lack strategic understanding on where to actually deploy this money and the systems through which we can really and trusted, deploy that capital in a trusted way.
I'm the unofficial investment advocate for Africa. I'm just trying to push this so much. I think the challenge is obviously we need investment, but we are a nation that has been colonized in the past. And that is a form of modern day colonialism, is to, if you have foreign investors, if your investors are American, Saudi, European, whatever. I mean, there's that fine line of trying to build our strength from within without foreign investment, but then also saying we actually want to grow and how it's, because that is also a form of ownership, right? If you have outside people still owning most of the assets or the capital, like it's not actually in our favor long term. We're trying to break free from that. So where do you see like the role of foreign investment, and how do we maintain our identity as Africans and not say, okay, just come in and tell us how we're going to do things or control our assets?
And by the way, South Africa might differ from Uganda, not most of, and our history, even Asians were expelled in Uganda in the 1980s, during the times of Amin, actually 1970s, during the times of Amin, and it left a lot of wealth returned back to Ugandans or Africans. So our story might a little bit differ from South Africa. Of course, talking from the African context, maybe a lot could still be indeed in the hands of colonialists. But I think in my understanding, it's only that maybe, and this is an argument I hold, maybe our leaders, as soon as they get into office, they are either manipulated or the system already manipulates their way of thinking to follow the colonialist systems. But I think I would advocate for a complete political revamp and systematic revamp from the colonial kind of systems to the African, and we develop our own systems. I know it is a conversation that is very, very complicated. Looking at what our brother in next to Mali is, not Cote d'Ivoire, Burkina Faso, I hope you know Ibrahim Traore. You can see that even when he's trying to completely change the system to an African or to own the system, he's experiencing a lot of rejection, we hear there are a lot of maybe planned killings just to eliminate him. But I think it is high time African countries peacefully looked at a possible way how to build its own systems and run by its own systems. And I know a lot of work being done by the same institutions, countries who in disguise come to our countries on a perspective of development of our countries, but yet in actual sense actually are doing some sort of positioning for their own countries. So I think if we are indeed to develop Africa and to build investments that develop Africa, we need a complete political system revamp. But I acknowledge it is one of the hardest things. But nonetheless, we are a new generation, and we ought to do something that we can manage, and maybe our other next generation will add on the same.
I have some horror stories of investors coming into Africa and misusing our women, children. So there's a lot of that because we're a vulnerable nation, at least South Africa. And we don't want that, obviously. So I think the challenge is, how do we create value from within, but also try and get our own investors to support that growth? And maybe we do have to adapt. America maybe has got a whole different system that runs a lot on credit, and they have a lot of liquid cash. So it's a whole different context. So innovation might just look different. And we can't replicate what America is doing. We have to adapt it to our African context and what that means. And maybe it might take a bit slower for us to innovate, and maybe we will be in more traditional industries, but also maybe that's okay. We don't have to be on the forefront of like AI and certain technologies, as long as we're providing something that the continent needs. But one thing that has been interesting, a friend of mine speaks a lot about this, is how the purchasing power dynamic is changing in Africa, because now anybody can have a mobile device for cheap and become an active user of apps, contribute to that economy. Even if they're living in a shack or in a poor establishment, they're still participating. There's still so much activity mixed with our fast population growth rate, means that some interesting things are happening and that growth is inevitable.
Yeah.
As long as we have the right minds working, like software engineers, computer scientists like yourself, working with others, their co-founders, whatever skills they have, producing nice products. But how do you see the future of Africa, given that the fact that we're all on mobile devices, we have a fast population growth rate?
Just to give you maybe a familiar example, research shows that South Africa was able to build grow its financial inclusion by 23%. I think from around 33 to around 34% to around 57%. Financial inclusion as a result of startups in just a period of about 8 years. I mean, 2014 to around 2022. And that literally shows proof and potential of technology. And I mean, we cannot talk about technology and we do not talk about business. We do not talk about entrepreneurship, because what technology cannot build itself, and neither can entrepreneurship grow scale by its own, but that merge will definitely lead to a different story. So my take on that is, as long as we have built a system through which we can fund our own potential startups, potential businesses. And by the way, most people misunderstand the word startup to starting a small grocery shop. No. It is a business that has at least an innovation aspect to it, and with potential to disrupt and scale. I should start a business today, even if it slugs for about 5 years. But after that time, I should quickly see it fastly running to Kenya, to South Africa, to Nigeria, to wherever, or even go beyond Africa. We have seen a lot of financial technologies that are serving our diaspora colleagues best to send money in Africa or to Africa. So that is the perspective. We should look at startups, not starting up, a simple grocery kind of business. So I see us investing technology to drive the power and potential startups have, could be one of the game changers that African economies have at their disposal to actually rebuild and restate and re-own our own countries, re-own our continent as a whole. Yes.
And it's people with your skill set that is going to make that happen. I mean, you need to have the hard skills, the data, beautifying skills.
And as I think we once referred to in the conversation, we generally Africa are I think we are one of the continents. In fact, we are the continent that has the youngest population in the world, meaning that there is a lot of potential in young people if we had the right approach to or right systems to skill our own young people. The jobs we are seeing, Indians taking, BPO, business process outsourcing, those should be African jobs. But the system could be partly failing us, failing our young people. When I see a lot of young people moving from different countries, including Uganda, to the United Arab States and countries to do manual labor, it's colonized or it is improved slavery. And it really hurts me, but I mean...
People want a good life. They want a good income, they want security.
And you know what is surprising? Yesterday I was listening to one of the richest Ugandan, who is Indian Ugandan. And he said that Ugandans will choose, or even if it is a South African or African, will choose to go to maybe any other external country or those greener pasture kind of countries, and they will own 2 jobs. But back here in Uganda, you'll barely find them trying to look for the second job. Why? Because going there, they find life is hard, they have to work hard, and of course, as they work hard, they are going to succeed, both in that kind of setting, and of course, when they come this side, they are looked at as angels, oh my God, and that is why we even look at angel investors anyway. But I think we need a lot of awareness. We need a system that empowers us to be hardworking and put in as much effort as possible. And that has to come through our education system as well.
I think a lot of focus is needed on value creation. That's one takeaway. I did 2 startup courses, and value creation, that whole mindset shift of it's not about management. It's also not about creation per se. It's about actually finding value. How do we add value to society? And if we're not aware of that, then we'll just go into whatever we're seeing work for us in our favor. But we have to think bigger, to think longer term. So Kenneth, when we're thinking about value creation, for example, sometimes we get restricted in how we think. It starts with our own brains and our own creativity. I always think, sometimes we think, we have to progress into the next phase of our career. And so I think, okay, what are my skill sets? Well, I've taught English. And even shifting from English teaching to public speaking coaching has been taken so long to figure out, I can shift into, or even now, okay, my skill sets are language, media, music. If I had to go back to South Africa, how could I contribute best to my country given my skills? I don't speak the African languages, and only 8% of our country speaks English as a first language. And there's a movement in South Africa in the language field, which is my field too, to invest in developing more African languages, material, and bringing that into the education system. So then I think, there's no point in me. What role can I play in innovation in South Africa? But sometimes we get so limited in our history of what we studied or whatever. And I think the value of what you studied in computer science is that you can think across industries, and you can ready your program to think, what product can I create in any industry? So how do we shift our mindset to think more like that, where we say, let's just look at in general what problems we have in our society? How do we fall in love with the problem, as they say in the startup courses, and actually identify, okay, these are problems that we can solve, even if I have a background in a different sphere.
It's a mindset issue, and beyond mindset, it is understanding that times have changed, and that begins from our parents to us, the children. And when we're growing up, I don't want to assume that I'm too old, but when we were growing up, they would tell us that you need to become an engineer, you need to become a doctor. There were a few specific jobs or careers that would define success. But surprisingly, they are not anymore kind of careers that define success. You find a doctor, actually doctors, teachers, engineers are some of the lowest paid or lowest earning people when it comes to like official, payments. But you find that someone who has done totally different thing, business, maybe social media and stuff like that, they're earning twice, thrice, or even 10 times this traditional career kind of person. And that again comes back to one concept we call mindset change. We need this thing called mindset change to possibly, even when we go out and say, it starts with me. I mean, there is nothing like with me when a million of other people are following a political system that doesn't encourage that. So I think the mindset change should be looked at as a political problem or as a government problem, as a government problem, not just an individual problem. And the effort to change that has to be affirmative action of education, awareness creation, and so on and so forth. So I think, and now looking at it from a personal perspective, we need everyone to get to this conversation and see and actually say, okay, what have I studied? But in reality, what is available? What can I do? People need to start looking at changing career not as something very hard. I can assure you we spent 20 years to get a degree, but you only spent 3 years to get that degree. So it means that you can still delete or just leverage that university 3 years and change that career now using just 1 year to learn a skill in maybe programming, maybe learn a skill in computer, in social media management, to learn a skill in artificial intelligence, learn a skill in business accounting, and so on and so forth. We just need to retool ourselves to look at what is the market looking for. We are not going to train telecom engineers when in Uganda we don't have any company that is hiring a telecom engineer. We are literally failing at that.
I was just going to say that about the markets. Like I never have focused on the markets because in my mind, I was on the artistic journey. I was performing as a singer and songwriter while teaching English online. And I'd always sort of I was quite airy-fairy, quite artsy, and just kind of, my brain was more looking for inspiration that I could channel into songwriting or whatever. But I never thought about the market, like, oh, there's a market. The only time I realized that it was such a big thing was when I did the startup course. I did my pitch at the end. I just followed the template, the framework. And when I wrote my pitch, and then I had the slide on the market, and I had somebody film from behind the response of the audience. And then you could see all the older Dutchmen lean in as soon as I spoke about the market and how big the market was. And I was like, oh, and only when I looked with my artistic lenses at their body language, like them leaning in. And I was like, oh, that's what they care about, is the market. But I never think about that because you cannot really be a true artist if you're chasing money, right? But in business, you have to look at the market. And I think with startups, they're not necessarily looking at a market that already exists. They're trying to step into a market, create a market, or find what is going to emerge. So you do need the creativity there. But when it comes to creativity, I think one skill that I am grateful for from our education system was even in the sciences, like mathematics and physical science, or biology, we were taught the knowledge in high school. We had a whole different education system. So we were taught the knowledge, we had to do all the equations, everything. But then they gave us problems, they gave us a lot of scenarios, even in high school, where we had to find creative solutions. So it was very much solutions focused. But I think it could have been a bit more about the market and understanding that. So I think that's a very good point you made.
While you're speaking, actually something hit my mind, and that was, whereas those subjects are very, very relevant. I mean, it's a grooming stage, and at that point and at that level, maybe we need to find ourselves what we are potential at. It's only that one challenge that persists is you keep on doing things that they have even already seen that you're not good at. Even after, say, elementary school, which is maybe primary school in Uganda, moving on to high school or secondary school, you're still being, pushed into things that you clearly, or even teachers have clearly seen that you're not good at. So if at least there was, something to assess, this one now can take this direction based on their competence of their elementary school, because elementary school affects or influences a lot of, you cannot be bad in mathematics in elementary school, 7 years of elementary school, and you say that you'll be good at it in secondary school or in high school. I don't think that is possible. So at that point, I think our education system should be immediately retooling these individuals to actually start a new journey. And there is a personal perspective. I've always wondered, why do Africans marry very late or get married slightly late? It's because the market of marriage is dependent on sustainability. I won't get married when I cannot afford to take care of a family. And because our education system will take you 20 years, it means you only sort of get ready at 25 or 30 or even plus. So to me, I think we have that wasted gap where people are just moving in the system, following the system, but which system is actually misleading to some extent. But I definitely acknowledge that, doing those many aspects of things will definitely help you get exposed, get to understand what you can do better, what you can't do better. And even at old stage, one of the other things that has held a lot of us back is exposure. If you realize or noticed, the first question you hit me with was, tell us how you get or you got into this space. If I didn't have an opportunity to travel to Dar es Salaam, and one of the vivid examples I saw, by the way, was KK Security. I don't know whether it is in South Africa, because I know it is not African. Mm-hmm. So I had seen this security company in Uganda. And when I traveled to Dar es Salaam, young as I was, I saw the same company guarding our neighborhood. I was staying near the beach called Coco Beach at the time. I don't know whether the name has changed, but I was inspired, and I felt like I need to build a business that crosses borders just by that simple exposure that I got. Now, imagine if you have seen an institution in your neighborhood and you don't know that this is an international company, you'll never have a new different thinking whatsoever. And so even at an older age, there is need for exposure. If I am Ugandan and I want to build solutions that move across the continent, I need to move to South Africa and see how can our solution be retooled to fit South Africa, fit Nigeria, fit USA, fit UK, and so on and so forth.
I think I got way too much exposure. So sometimes also before COVID, you could travel so much. And then after COVID, I had to come back into reality and into the systems, education systems. So I think there's also a limit where you have to say, okay, I've done my exploration. Now let's get back in and let's produce value and let's see the return on that investment. So yeah, I think the exposure is good, but then at some point you've got to make a decision of where you're going to plug in.
I have a small example to also illustrate. Maybe if someone is struggling with the same, they could actually get it clearly. Between 2015 to 2017, actually 2014 to 2016, I was watching a lot of motivation, a lot of business, how to build a business. And that led me to actually thinking that we could sell ideas in Uganda. And we started something to do with build concepts and look for the market to sell the concepts. But it was because I'd watched a lot of motivation and not even knowing that what works in the USA, in the UK, doesn't actually work in Africa or in Uganda, to be specific. So after 2 years of a lot of motivation, I felt like I no longer need to even watch any motivation. I can assure you for the next 3 years, I did not even go back to my videos. But after those 3 years, I felt empty again. And I felt like I needed new knowledge, new rejuvenation to actually get new knowledge to put into practice. So as you've said, there is always time to learn, acquire, And then there's always time you need to actually practice, put into place what you have learned and exercise it, maybe into your business, maybe into the market or something like that, until that point where you also feel again, no, I need new knowledge now because I've tried everything that I've already acquired. So that stage is very, very necessary to acknowledge and realize. Otherwise, you might end up as just like our big brothers who always look at, oh, I will do it tomorrow. The next day is tomorrow. They get another motivation. Oh, yes, I am actually more empowered. A month, a year, 2, 10. They have never started.
Reminds me of South Africa. We like to talk a lot. We like our coffees and cake and markets and beaches and trips. And that's great. But, if we really want to innovate, like we've got to have those periods of like intensive studying and working. I mean, a lot of people are doing both now. So working and studying, always doing a course. But yeah, I think in my mind, I'm like, let's go into a heavy study zone and a heavy research period, and then we'll emerge and then we'll push and put it into practice. But do you think that Ugandans in general, like they're very hardworking people?
So there's a lot of laziness, comfort. Yesterday, again, in the same conversation I was listening in, the gentleman said it is in Uganda where they have never seen someone dying of hunger. In Uganda, you don't die of hunger. Even when you're on the street, you know that you're going to get food anyway. Either the neighbor is going to say, it is our responsibility, and the neighbor could be a restaurant owner, could be having a home. It's our responsibility to feed this beggar or this madman or something like that. Generally, when you are at home, and maybe you are privy to this, when you are at home, you feel you don't work so hard because everything is available. Yeah, so because of that geographical privilege, that we have plenty of food, we have a good weather and climate that favors, production of food. There is a lot of food wastage. In fact, if you have a lot of money, you could also think about staying in Uganda.
There's always bananas.
Yeah. So generally, and there's also a notion that if you took 20 Ugandans to Kenya, 5 will get a job, and vice versa. If you brought 20 Kenyans to Uganda, 15 will get a job. That tells you the story. I am not sure whether I will easily define it, but the fact that 5 in Kenya taken from Uganda will only get a job, and 15 out of 20 from Kenya will get a job in Uganda, maybe already tells the story. It's an argument. I'm not sure how realistically it is, but generally I can see a lot of my friends, brothers and sisters exercising some sort of laziness. And when it comes to work, of course, if the culture has raised me in that way, I won't take it so serious when I get to the workplace, because I know, yes, if I lose the job, I will get another one. Anyway, I'll sit home and get what to eat. What am I struggling with, or why am I even bothering myself? And maybe one last one is, it also leads to, getting to a workplace and you don't even focus on personal growth and development for the benefit of the business or the work you're doing. So at the end of the day, that laziness will keep following you. Get the workplace, you're not good at what you have been hired to do. Instead of getting online courses and re-empower yourself to actually be a better person and maybe grow your career, grow your earnings, people are comfortable. Oh no, I will be here 2 years, 3 years. You move, go to a similar job, same money. So there is that perspective, but there are also hardworking Ugandans who are actually taking this onto themselves. And again, the same example, why is it that when you move to the United States, UK, or even South Africa, you want to work extremely harder? Means there is something that has to be figured out, and maybe gets more people to actually realize that they need to work extremely hard even when they're Ugandans.
So your hub is actually playing a very central role to motivation and the working culture and getting people on a more international way of functioning.
Sort of. I can't say we are focusing on that exactly.
But it is a byproduct.
Yes, yeah. Of course, I can't have a conversation without mentioning some of these critical factors that influence personal growth, that influence economic growth, that influence efficiency of systems, whether they are for businesses, whether they are for individuals.
Yeah.
So I find myself actually, because again, you cannot address a problem without talking about the source of the problem.
So how do you think of growth? How do you think of growth? Because in the American mind, the capitalist mind, it's about return on investment. What is growth to you, though? Let's get artsy, because you see, like in Africa, what is growth to you? Because to me, in South Africa, growth is like building up the self-esteem, being able to function, being able to alleviate poverty, being able to create value, but that is in a healthy way, that's not in an exploitative way. So it's about transforming the way we even create value to not exploit. So what does growth mean to you?
So growth to me is actually every day looking forward to a new challenge. I think if I was to summarize it in the shortest possible way, that is how I would summarize it. Because, there is this catchphrase that the moment you stop learning is the time you start dying. Yeah. So I want to think that if I wake up every day and I am just feeling easy about what is going on, it means that my head is no longer functioning to manage the challenge. It is now lousing. It is now at like standstill. It's not working, in short. So that is maybe it is now means starts working in reverse instead of working in, forward. So I think for me, growth is about, whether personal or business growth, it's really about taking on a new challenge. And of course, the challenge has to be in the positive direction. You cannot take on a challenge that is in the negative direction. But we know that challenges will come in a negative way. But as a business or as an individual, to deal with those challenges, you must face it towards the positive. How do I change this to the positive? How do I make it to my advantage? How do I this and that? So for me, growth is about doing what I did not know yesterday, or trying to manage something I have always dreamt having, but I know it isn't easy to actually have it. While we are building startups, we always say, if it is not hard for other people to actually do, that is a wrong startup. That is a wrong business, because anyone can do it. So you have thousands of or millions of competitors. That business will never grow. But if it is very hard to do, and that is where IP also comes in, they will tell you that for you to get intellectual property, you must do something that is really, really new or really complex, that has never been done, or that is just new, or that is improved in a way that has never existed. Anyways, that is innovation. That is invention. So if there is no aspect of you doing something new, something unique, that is not easy to be done by someone else. I know you could say that everyone is a doctor. Why am I, if I fought to become a doctor then? But what kind of doctor do you want to be? Because it is just you. The other doctor you're seeing is a different character. It could be a doctor who in the hospital is good, but in the community is bad. So how about we look at you being the best doctor, but who is not just best at the job, but also in the community. So then that now challenges you to start thinking about community growth, you being an agent of community growth through your profession, through your career, or something like that. So there is always that uniqueness individuals have than just thinking of a rivalrism. I wanted to be a doctor, and all my parents wanted me to be a doctor, and I have become one. What else is there to, they're not your parents. You're not your parents. They're going to for the most part, leave you in this world and leave you to even nurture new children. So if you don't look at your life as you and build it And maybe through that, you can accelerate even a better one with your children that you will have. Then for me, that won't be growth, but rather vice versa, thinking about it as a new challenge to deal with for improvement, for development and betterment of you as an individual. It all comes back to you.
So there you have it from Kenneth. The way to grow is to challenge yourself. Kenneth, thank you so much. You're so enlightening. And I love the way you share stories in your African Ugandan style. I think it's going to be really nice for the listeners from different backgrounds to see this type of storytelling. I just love the pictures you've left with us. So thank you so much, Kenneth, for coming on the show. If there's one way that people can get involved with what you're doing, what is it that they can do? Where would you like to steer them towards?
If there's one way, it's actually one, supporting our work, but as well as thinking about how you can build capital in your own country. You are free to reach out to TechBuzzHub, to me personally, and maybe we support the structure of how, not financially, but the structure on how that can work, how that can be built. As I earlier mentioned, my personal objective is to empower a new breed of African entrepreneurs. And so if you are really looking at doing something that is phenomenal, that improves the way life happens in your country, in your area of work, in your community, I am just a message away, an email away, and then we can provide you that support. For some reason, some support is always available for free, by the way, unless if it requires a lot of someone's time that then they want maybe to price it, but this kind of mentorship can always be free. You can always reach out. And I think for me, it's that way of unlocking capital in the continent that will drive growth in this country. They should feel free to follow TechBuzzHub, very available on LinkedIn for the most part, but also on other social media platforms like Instagram. And we'll be happy to engage further with your listeners or our listeners today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kenneth, for coming on this Mama Africa show. We appreciate having you here and keep doing the amazing work that you're doing.
My pleasure, my pleasure. And thank you very much for hosting me, Rebecca.
Mm.